Halloween night 1978 on the outskirts of Sioux City, Iowa. Three 13-year-old friends, Whitney House, Kent Pine and Kenneth Knopfrey, started trick-or-treating. Around 5 p.m. only one of them made it home that night. What took place during those hours was forever etched into their memories. This is the story as was told by Kent years later. We all met up at Whitney's house on Halloween in 1978. In my mind it was going to be another fun-filled Halloween. With lots of candy, we talked about hitting as many houses as we could, and we brought our pillowcases to see how full we could get them. As we started walking down the street to the first house, I remember the excitement in the air as we laughed and talked about each other's costumes. I remember I was Dracula that year and my friends were some kind of monsters. We've been going for about an hour when I started noticing what looked like a red-colored band following us. I'd seen her earlier and thought nothing of it, but the roundabout route we were taking now meant the van wasn't just driving along by happenstance. I thought about telling my friends, but they were having such a good time I didn't want to spoil it, and I wasn't 100% sure the van was following us. No need to freak them out if it's nothing, I thought. We continued going from house to house when we came to an area where there was "Welcome to Dark Road Legends ... where fear takes form and shadows tell their stories. Let's begin." A long stretch of cornfields before we'd hit the next neighborhood. As we were walking along the dirt road, I instinctively looked back, and there behind us a ways was a red-colored van. Guys, I didn't want to say anything earlier, but I think the van behind us has been following us for a while, I said. "What, are you serious?" asked Whitney. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure now," I responded. "Oh hell. What do we do?" asked Kenneth. "I say we just keep walking as fast as we." Right alongside us and slowed down. We looked over and could see a man staring at us. I'll never forget the glare he gave us. His window was down with his form visible as he had it sitting halfway out the window on his forearm. I noticed he had a tattoo that read "Sowin," and below it were the numbers and symbol 3+1. At the time I didn't know what Sam Hine meant, but I'd heard the name somewhere before. We continued walking as fast as we could when suddenly he hit the brakes. Something inside me went off, and without thinking I dropped my pillowcase of candy and took off running towards the cornfields. I quickly jumped the ditch that was there and continued running. Right before I disappeared into the field, though, I looked back at the man and could see he was running and jumping the ditch as well. I also remember seeing my friends running into the field but lost sight of my mind as well. I just hoped they continued running and were able to get away from the man. As I ran, I kept my hands and arms up in front of me, because if you've ever ran through a cornfield before, you'll know getting hit repeatedly in the face with corn doesn't feel good. I kept looking over my shoulder, trying to listen to see if someone was there, but I couldn't hear or see anything. After running for a while, I needed to stop to catch my breath, so I sat down and tried being as quiet as I could, which was difficult considering how heavy I was breathing. After I calmed down a bit, I listened intently to see if I could hear the man of my friends, but there was nothing but dead silence. I started thinking about what I should do next when suddenly I heard one of my friends cry out, "No, no, 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 leave me alone." I could hear the sound of thrashing corn stalks as my friend screamed out. It sounded like Whitney. Right then I knew I needed to get out of the field fast and go get help again. I was worried about which way to go, and going the wrong way would send me further into the corn, which meant I could be lost for hours. I knew I had no choice, though. I couldn't sit there doing nothing. I picked the direction I thought would take me out, but also away from the man, and I started running again. As I made my way through the field like before, I would stop every now and then to see if I could hear anything, but I heard nothing, just the sound of my heart beating in my chest. I ran for a long time before I finally made it to the edge of the cornfield. Before stepping out, I stuck my head out to see if I could tell where I was and to make sure the man wasn't there. It was dark now, but my eyes had adjusted to the darkness and I could see enough to see a dirt road that went along the edge of the field. These dirt roads are all over along the edge of the fields, allowing farmers access. I still had no idea where I was, but either way I needed to move. The thought of getting help from my friends was my only concern now. I chose to go right and started walking. I was very tired at that point, but walked as fast as my legs would go. I'd been walking for quite some time when I heard the faint sound of a vehicle approaching. I couldn't see its lights, which made me nervous, and I remember thinking if it's the man, he probably would have been smart enough to turn his lights off. I quickly ran back into the corn. I ran far enough I couldn't see the road, but not far enough I'd get turned around. I crouched down and began to shake with fear. I prayed the man wouldn't find me. A few minutes later I could hear the vehicle getting closer and closer when suddenly it stopped almost right in front of my position. I then heard a door open and someone get out. I thought about running, but then he'd know my location. I decided to stay there, crouched down and see how it played out. All of a sudden I could see a small light coming from the direction of the dirt road. It must be the man with a flashlight, and then I thought about my footprints being on the dirt road. I was prepared to run if he took one step into the corn. I had some distance between me and him, but not enough to make me feel safe. Those seconds waiting to see what he did next were some of the scariest seconds of my life. Time slowed down at that point, and without warning the man started bolting through the cornfield, coming straight at me. My fight or flight instinct took over, and I immediately jumped up and started running in the opposite direction. As I ran I had a sickening feeling he was going to catch me and I was going to die, but I knew I had to try and get away. I ran until I was almost going to pass out from exhaustion, and I didn't want to pass out and have him catch me. Right before I thought I was going to pass out, I immediately stopped, resting my hands on my knees to catch my breath. I tilted my head slightly to see if I could hear him coming. There was nothing but eerie silence, only the occasional sound of corn leaves gently blowing with the wind. As I was catching my breath, I decided I needed to focus on surviving and not care if I was lost and going deeper into the field. I knew eventually I'd find my way out, even if it took me all night to get back home. If this man caught me, I knew I would die. I thought I'd seen what evil was, but I hadn't until I saw that man's face. The thought of my friends was also constantly in the back of my mind, and I prayed they were all right. After I caught my breath, I continued walking the way I'd been running, stopping every so often to make sure I wasn't being followed. I walked for what I guess were hours before finally making it to the edge of the field. This time though I'd come to an asphalt road. I walked along that road for a while before I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car who then took me home. When I got home the police were there, and it was 2 a.m. They took me inside, sat me down and had me tell them everything that had taken place. They hadn't found Whitney or Kenneth yet, but they said they did find our pillowcases of candy along the road when we first jumped the ditch to head into the field. The police quickly left to go look for the van and continue searching for my friends. I've never seen my parents more hysterical in my life up to that point, and never did again after that. I went to bed about 4 a.m. and just laid there wide awake. I wanted to go help find my friends, but was also scared to death to go outside for fear of the man. About 3 p.m. that day we heard a knock on our door. It was the same policeman who were at my house when I made it home. They said they'd found only Kenneth, so far they'd found him hiding in the middle of the field, only several hundred yards away from where we jumped the ditch. It wasn't until 8:45 p.m. we had another knock on the door. It was the police again. What they told us and what we found out later has haunted my entire life, and I think about it every single day at least once. They said they found the red-collared van along one of the dirt roads just sitting there. When they opened the van, they found Whitney tied up in the back along with an adult woman whose name was Autumn Reese. What they found sitting in the driver's seat though left the police stunned and dumbfounded. They did in fact find the man with the tattoos, but they said, judging by how decomposed the body was, it looked as though he'd been dead for several weeks. They also said they found the address to the apartment he was living in, which was several hours away, and they were working on getting out there along with the local police in that area. They said they'd let us know what they found. About a week later, we got a phone call from the police saying they wanted all of us, including our parents, to come down to the police station to discuss something. When we got there, they took us to a meeting room and sat us all down. A few minutes later, the chief of police came into the room along with several other officers. They pulled up some chairs and sat down. The chief opened up a file with some papers and photographs, took a deep breath and said, "What I'm about to tell you will sound strange and hard to believe, but it's what we found at the apartment of the man with the van. When we went inside his apartment, we immediately noticed the same exact words written all over the walls. The words were 3+1 must die. It was written everywhere. We also found several journals where he'd been writing down random things about his life. Some of the writings had dates going back several hundred years. In one of them, he wrote about how he must kill 3 children plus 1 adult every Halloween before midnight, or something terrible would happen to him. He didn't go into detail as to what exactly. We were also able to track down his last known place of residence based on information we found at his current apartment, which was in Montgomery, Alabama. We talked with the local law enforcement there about what had happened and what we'd found. They told us last year, the day after Halloween, they'd found the child then being grabbed by the man, tied up, blindfolded, her mouth covered and put into the back of the van. It's safe to say I never went trick-or-treating after that. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe. Thank you for joining Dark Rot Legends. Subscribe for more tales of terror. If you dare.